Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and I'm joined by the man that this venue is named after, the Nash, Lewis Nash. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
My pleasure, Jake. Nice to be with you.
It's really great to connect with you, man. I had a ball just now witnessing that ensemble, the Thelonious Monk Institute.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, can you talk about the first time that you went back? To me, the motherland is Africa.
Yes.
Okay? Jazz is European classical harmonies with African rhythms. In my mind, there's a blend there. Can you talk about the first time that you went back to Africa and to play? Because, you know, when I talked to Ahmad Jamal, he never went back because of apartheid. But Bobby Hutcherson did, Joe Chambers did. And to me, rhythm is the key to new vocabulary. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about what was inspiring to you about the first time you went back to Africa.
Well, in all honesty, I've only been on the African continent one time. And that one time was in the country of Morocco. So I haven't been to other places where I'd like to go, Ghana, Mali, other places that I would, be able to witness some of the things that I've, would like to. So I've had to do it via other musicians who have done it, and most notably Randy Weston, who I work with.
He's coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I'll be here for that.
His African Rhythms Quintet.
Tell me about that. What have you learned from Randy?
And so Randy, Randy has, here's one of the most important things I'll say. He has the deepest respect and honor towards the great musicians who were on this side, who were in the New World, meaning in America, meaning James P. Johnson, Thelonious Monk, Fats Waller, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, that lineage here. And he grew up in Brooklyn around with Max Roach and Cecil Payne and people like that. So, and was involved with all the musicians who were part of the growth and development of the music we call jazz now. So he has the deepest respect for that branch of the tree, so to speak. And so what I really appreciate about him is that he doesn't diminish that branch in favor of another branch. It's really a fusion and a true, well, it's not even a fusion. It's, because the rhythmic impetus and feeling of the music, the swinging feeling, can be found in much of the rhythms in traditional African music anyway. So especially the triplet-based, kind of rolling triplet-based feeling. So, and I've been able to, there's a gentleman who put out a book, I can't think of his name now, about African rhythms adapted to the drum set. I wish I could think of his name. But I remember reading that book, and he actually had singled out me as a couple other drummers, but I remember because my name was in there, I wanted to see what he was talking about. And there was something about that he said he heard in my ride cymbal pattern, the way that I approached the ride cymbal pattern that reminded him of some type of African bell pattern.
It's an unconscious thing for you.
Yeah, it's definitely
you're just rock. This is Lewis. I want to talk to you for younger cats who are going to see this video. I want you to talk. A lot of the rock guys that I interview, Jim Keltner, John Densmore, the list goes on, Hal Blaine, all these studio cats.
Right.
They were steeped in jazz. They were obsessed with Philly Joe. They wanted to be Philly Joe.
Right.
And when I listened to those cats, Max Roach, Kenny Clark, they were dancing on the cymbals. Yeah. And in my mind, there was less accentuation on the bass drum to keep time. Is there validity to that?
There's validity to that.
And can you talk about how people can be less reliant to keep time on the bass drum and dance on those cymbals?
Well, the whole thing about riding on a cymbal, this comes out of the American jazz tradition in any way. I mean, the focus moved from the bass drum and hi-hat, in that transition from swing to what we call bebop and beyond, to a focus and importance of the riding on a cymbal being the primary timekeeper and primary focus of the time, and then the other three limbs, left hand, left foot, and right foot, were used to interject counter rhythms to this main focus of the time. And so the guys who you mentioned, like Kenny Clark, Art Blakey, Max Roach, Roy Haynes, even going a little bit before that to Joe Jones and
Tiny Khan.
Sid
Tiny
Catlett.
Khan.
Tiny Khan is another one.
Yeah, yeah.
But the guys who preceded what's known as the bebop
Papa Joe.
era, particularly Papa Joe. In my opinion, Papa Joe is the beginning of modern drumming.
Explain why. This is extremely important.
Well, number one, the way the time felt, the forward momentum of the time. Even when he was playing on the hi-hat, it was moving forward. It has a forward impetus. And then when he seamlessly went from that hi-hat smooth legato kind of forward-moving hi-hat approach, he went seamlessly to the ride cymbal as if he had been doing it all the time. And he had that same feeling when he played on the ride cymbal that he had when he played on the hi-hat. So to me, he's really the kind of the father of modern jazz drumming as we know it. You know.
Tell me about this whole thing. I mean, it's my first time here, and I live in Tucson.
Okay.
And I found my voice in Tucson, and I've been doing this extraterrestrial radio show and interviewing Ahmad Jamal and Ted Nugent. And what you find out is Ted Nugent went to go see Sun Ra and Yusef Lateef in Detroit because they were sonic expanders.
Yeah.
And my question is, how did you learn? Could you talk about an experience in your career where you learned how to feel the music? Because the truth is that I see a lot of cats today, and they have huge chops, but they haven't had a lot of bandstand experience. So it seems a little bit techno.
Well, I feel very fortunate, Jake, and I'll say it in these terms. When I was younger, I grew up here in Phoenix, and before I left to go to New York, I had opportunities to play with Sonny Stitt, Art Pepper. I had a duo. You were talking about sonic expansion.
TikTok, no TikTok time.
I
love it.
I was with a saxophone player named Alan Chase.
Is he still around?
He lives in Massachusetts now. He taught at Berkeley. I think he teaches at Berkeley now. He may be a dean there.
Wow.
And he taught at New England Conservatory. But we were both students at Arizona State at the time. He's a couple years ahead of me. And I played in his small group there. But anyway, we put together a duo, and we opened for Old and New Dreams when they came through. That's the Ornette-based Dewey Redman, Ed Blackwell, Charlie Hayden, and Don Cherry.
That was the group you opened for?
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
We opened for them. We opened for the Art Ensemble of Chicago.
Famadou Damboy?
Yes, who I know well.
A dear friend.
And Sun Ra came to Arizona as well. So, I always say to my students, everything is on the table because you're dealing with sonic possibilities. And who's to say that you can't interject into a straight ahead swinging situation some of the sonic possibilities that come from another source or situation.
I love it.
It's just you have to have the musicality to know where to put it, where it's most effective. So I always say everything's on the table, from the pops and the earliest, from ragtime and pops and all that, all the way through to and to what's happening now, what people consider the most cutting edge stuff now, and everything in between. I've played with Don Pullen and George Adams, and when Danny Richmond left that group, I replaced him in that group. A lot of incredible sonic possibilities there. If you know them, you know what to imagine. They came through Mingus's band. They did a lot of other stuff, and I'm always trying to remain open, even when I'm playing in what would be considered the most straight ahead situation. I'll interject something from, I might hear something in my head that may come from a James Brown type situation or a sound that
Bernard Purdy kind of pop.
Whatever. Everything's on the table is my point.
I mean, can you talk about a time where you faced adversity, where you were questioning yourself, ultimately how you overcame it? I mean, I think a lot of younger cats, I'm 38, and then the cats we saw today, they're super accomplished cats, but there's a lot of young cats who are more insecure. They doubt themselves. They're trying to find their individual voice. I mean, can you relay a time of inspiration when you were fighting it and ultimately how you overcame it?
Well, I think what we need as young, aspiring, creative musicians is a confirmation at certain points, junctures in our development. And so when people who have been out here doing it for years, who we respect, mentor type people and people who we have a lot of, who we look up to, icons of the music or whatever, if you encounter those types of people and they give you confirmation that you're on the right path or you're on the right track or that just a few little pointers here or there, or show a little time, take a little time to just show you that they appreciate your efforts to be a part of this thing, because this is to actually decide that you want to be a part of this is a major step. So I would say that in my life there were junctures where people would tell me things. When I was a student at Arizona State, originally I wasn't a music major, I was a broadcast journalism major. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of Max Robinson. Max Robinson was the first African American anchor on ABC News.
You want to do hard news or sports?
I wanted to do hard news. Max Robinson, Walter Cronkite,
I love
Roger
it.
Mudd.
I love it.
That was
Dude,
my.
now you're talking to the man, Jake Feinberg. Yeah, I love this, dude.
But
you pivoted out.
But I had been playing music all along from elementary school until so I played the drums, and I played in high school in what was called the stage band. In those days, they didn't really call them. I think eventually it was called Jazz Rock Lab or something like that. But so I played, and so when I got to Arizona State, even though I wasn't a music major, I took electives in the music department. So I, in the course of doing that, I encountered a lot of different musicians, upperclassmen, and musicians who would come through town. Maybe someone giving a clinic at Arizona State, and I was being told by some people who I felt knew what they were talking about. That I had something, that thing, whatever they say, and that I should consider perhaps this as a profession, because I certainly was not. I didn't know any professional musicians. There weren't any professional
How old were
musicians.
you? About 19, 20?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when Rick
18,
Marotta. That's when Rick
19.
Marotta started to play.
Yeah,
19.
Yeah. And so one of the actually I think he was a grad student or TA at the time. His name was Charles Argersinger. He was at Arizona State at the time, and he pulled me aside after class one day. I was in the music department at a rehearsal, and he said, "Lewis, you're not a music major, are you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "So you don't plan on a career in music?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think you're making a mistake." So that's what I mean about at certain junctures, people will say things to you to kind of get you to start to think another way, and that was one of them. There was a trumpet player who came through ASU as a clinician. His name was Bud Brisbois.
Yeah.
Brisbois, I think. And he was a high note kind of lead trumpet player. He's on a lot of recordings, some with Herbie Hancock, I remember, during the 70s. He came through, and he said something similar. You have that thing. You should consider going to New York. And then another point was when the Billy Taylor Trio came to Phoenix, and the drummer was Freddie Waits. And so I met Freddie Waits. Yes, that's right. So I met Freddie Waits, had a lesson with him.
Talk about Freddie. That dude's one of the most unsung cats.
He's an unsung hero.
Ever.
Yeah, he was my teacher, And,
that's unbelievable.
And he would always talk about the African continuum, is what he called it. There's a certain feeling
Phil
that
Ranlin
runs through the music.
The continuum.
Yes.
I love it.
And so I always was happy that I hooked up with him the time I did, because he got me focused on. He always used to say in my lessons, "Nash, you got to play with taste. Got to play with taste." So and he helped me to understand how to build an extended drum solo, a free extended drum solo that's not based on any form, but you create the form as you go. He was really instrumental in helping me understand that. And he would talk about the great masters from Baby Dodds all the way through to the modern era. So, and as a matter of fact, he's the person who introduced me to Max Roach, and that led to me getting an NEA grant to study with Max Roach back in the late 70s. So I really value those instances in my early development when people would pull me aside and maybe make comments and maybe steer me a certain way. And Freddie also said to me, you should think of coming to New York. Maybe you could think of studying with Max. Because after I went to New York in summer of '79 to study with Freddie. And at that point I met a lot of guys in New York, Joe Chambers, Billy Hart. I went to the Vanguard and heard Elvin for the first time sitting in the front row. I heard Art Blakey in person. Those were life-changing events, seeing and hearing those great drummers in person.
Pete LaRocca.
Yes.
You are part of the continuum. Jazz, clearly demonstrated today on the bandstand, is now a world music. But the Arts Ensemble of Chicago and Sun Ra and M Boom. I mean, Max Roach was adherent. I mean, Gary Bartz would say, he would go to blows if people called it jazz. Okay, and the pocket of time that I'm obsessed with is this pre-drum track, pre-disco, early '70s, when the roots of Joe Henderson, all the old guard was still there. Are the African roots of the music? How to keep those in the music when
I don't think
those cats now they don't play instruments. All right, they are sampling, rightfully so. They're using their environments. I mean, Mtume told me, he goes, "How did hip hop start? Cats went to the park and started to break it down."
Right.
How to keep the African roots in the music?
I just, I can't prove it, but I just feel like there's a DNA component.
What do you mean by that?
Sometimes you get in trouble saying that kind of thing, but I know what if what I'm saying is taken in the correct spirit, it'll be understood. There's a certain way that people of African descent in the New World kind of carry them. I'm here in America and in South America, in Brazil, and places like that, in the Caribbean. There's a certain thing, the way the speech syntax, the way all of that stuff, and that you can't. That's in there in the music, so it can't. I don't think there has to be a conscious, overt effort so much to keep it in there because it's in the way we are, in a certain sense. You know what I mean, Jay?
I just would counter by saying the Mickey Rokers, the Max Roaches, the Elvin Joneses. There was. All I know is Alan Schwartzberg and the white drummer said they've never heard a white cat swing the way a black cat does. And so, I know what you're saying in the DNA, but the idea of it just that Tony Williams and Ron Carter, all I know is I've done 700 interviews. And I just want to be, they're a cat, when I saw you play Nika's Dream, it validated that. And I don't want to make it, I just wonder if the internationalization of jazz is if we're going to lose the African roots of it. But you say it's in the DNA, so.
I think when you say swing, there's a certain, that's a feeling. We've come full circle back to what you were asking me at the very top of this interview about feeling. And when I hear Art Blakey, when I hear Elvin Jones, when I hear Max, when I hear Roy Haynes, when I, all these, Lewis Hayes, I could just name all the great drummers, Jack DeJohnette, there's a connection to the roots of swinging, i.e., Basie, Ellington, Pops, Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, that feeling. And that's why I said what I said about Randy Weston. Because even though, he talks about those giants all the time, Coleman Hawkins and Ellington and Monk and all them all the time. They weren't necessarily consciously, overtly trying to insert African rhythms into their music. Were they?
M Boom was. Roy
Monk, I'm talking about the.
Oh yeah, well,
Ellington, Monk. There was a certain way that they approached a groove or the beat or the pulse or the swinging feeling or phrasing. And young people today are much more adept at a straight eighth kind of feeling than they are at the swinging feeling. It has to relax into the swinging feeling. And there's a lot of times when I hear the young musicians now, and this isn't a diminishing them or putting them down, but there's just a difference in the way they feel the pulse. And they seem to more easily feel the straight eighth pulse than they do the swinging, rolling. When you think of Elvin, that kind of thing, it's hard for them to feel that.
Do you know? Quiz question do you know the only conga player who could play congas with Elvin?
No, who's that?
It's Don Elias. So tell me before I let you go, and it's just so great to connect with you. Where do you want the Nash to? The Nash's art is clearly going up. It's clearly the momentum's here. How do you want it to keep growing?
Well, I would like to have more of the full community embrace this place. And
by that, who do you mean? Who you want to?
When I say that, I would like to see more of the African American community in here, but here again, when we go to these festivals around the world, and and even in New York and in the States, you know, that's the same thing with the clubs. We're not seeing a majority of African American people in the audience, but I just feel like, and it's not that doesn't bother me in the sense of it's hindering me from doing anything. It's just something I think about because this music comes from the culture that we are, our culture, and the music is an extension of the culture. The music is a part of the history of what we've done here in America and spread throughout the world.
The drum is, I mean, that was a language.
Absolutely.
It is a language.
Absolutely.
And my one thing is to reach out to some churches.
Well,
So
that's already underway now. As
Oh,
a matter
good.
of fact, when Randy Weston comes, we're going to be performing. One of the performances will be at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, which has more than, I think, maybe around 3,000. If I'm guessing now, I think it's around that 3,000 members or more, and a pillar of the Black community in Phoenix. So that concert is open to the public, and I believe it's free. And that's a way for, Randy told me he'd like to see, from the age of 2 to the age of 100 there, and so that's what I mean. We have to make the music available for people to hear. And I think once we're able to do that in a consistent way, then maybe we'll draw more of the community here. But our focus is to present quality music and to help young people who show a desire to be a part of this creative improvisational element of music, to show them some support and encouragement as they go on their journey.
Do you like playing on the 1-3? You ever play any reggae?
Oh yeah, I love it.
You love reggae?
Sly and Robbie. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I missed the one drop beat in reggae, because they went to the 4 on the floor thing, and I missed the older.
Well, we have more to do, Lewis. Much love to you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. All right? Take care, brother.